2025. So happy Independence Day to all my fellow Americans. Hope a happy, healthy, prosperous, safe holiday, whatever you're doing, wherever you are, whenever you are. Now let's jump into the geopolitical side of things, shall we? Trump and the United States, especially the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and the Israeli government have all been making a lot of news headlines recently when it comes to the conflicts with Iran and Hamas and the Houthis, and also with the now potential agreements between Israel and Syria that might happen and is in what they call, quote, advanced talks, which is another word for saying, they're at the stage now where they're comfortable saying these talks are not just happening, but they actually might happen sooner rather than later, barring any unforeseen circumstances. But here's the thing: whenever anybody announces a potential deal in the Middle East, you know what happens? Look at what happened on October 7th. Yes, that's right. A terrorist attack will probably happen that will attempt to sideline or derail the deals. Why? Because the last thing that these extremist terrorists want are peace deals or anything close to peace deals, even disarmament or disengagement agreements, right? Anything that reduces the temperature, anything that lowers the flames, anything that tamps down the fire, the terrorists are obviously going to be against. Why? Because without conflict, they don't have any purpose. They have no raison d'etre. They will not exist for very long if no one is funding them and no one is arming them and equipping them and training them and sending them on their idiotic missions to try to destroy a country that is frankly far more powerful than it, or even another country that is far more powerful than that one, right? So expect that any agreements between Israel and Syria will probably be met first with a lot of material objections, complaint cylinders, um, bullets, bombs, explosions, violence, pain, injuries, even death, because that is what we have seen historically. And when it doesn't happen, it is an aberration from the norm. Right? It is very rare that we don't see it happen. And usually, we don't see it happen when it's not announced ahead of time. So look at the Declaration of Principles, right, between Israel and the Palestinian Authority in 1993. It was not announced far ahead of time. The terrorists who were against it versus the PA, which was the PLO at the time and still is, but before they created the PA upon signing the Declaration of Principles, right, the PLO did not discuss it very publicly, nor did Israel. Did people know about it some days ahead of time? Very few days ahead of time, right? Most people had no idea. But even in the world of where people did know about it, it was not very well known that it was in the very advanced stages of happening. The same thing happened when Israel made peace with Jordan. It was not very well known before it happened that it was going to happen. The same thing happened with the original peace agreement between Israel and an Arab party, which was Egypt. Right? Very few people knew that that was going to happen before it happened. Again, all examples of why these things have essentially taken effect, right? And even the Abraham Accords, most people had no idea at all that this was happening, right? I mean, yeah, sure, everybody heard that Kushner, Jared Kushner, was like the Middle East envoy or whatever, despite frankly not having the you know the credentials for it. But and whether you say it was corruption and he got paid to do it, whatever, doesn't matter. The fact is, he and the Trump administration during the first Trump administration did in fact deliver a peace agreement between Israel and the UAE and even Morocco, right? Eventually, even Sudan signed on to it. It was a very successful deal. Even a couple of other countries that didn't officially make peace with Israel still signed on to the Abraham Accords that they would no longer be in a like endless state of war or whatever. That they would improve their economic relationships and their cultural ties, and they would have some kind of mission between the two countries. So that it was a very successful plan, and it worked because it wasn't advertised like crazy beforehand. But now, because of the quote unquote success of the Abraham Accords, we're seeing a lot of advertisement and marketing from the Trump administration about how this could be a kind of a platform or a model to include, peace deals with, and he hasn't been too specific, but he has definitely said that Syria would be a key component if it happened, and Saudi Arabia as well, and all these other countries that he hasn't necessarily specifically named as saying, yes, we're in talks with them about it, but he wants them to be. So he's doing the usual marketing and advertising for it, which may very well be the downfall of these advancements in the development of the Abraham Accords. Right? You may not get these additional countries to sign on because they may say, no, it's too risky because it's too well known ahead of time, and it's going to let these extremists do some kind of crazy attack, possibly in our own countries, and we want to avoid that. So they might actually not join that. They might not want to be a party to that. Right? If it's done the way that it was done before, in that they let it kind of not be talked about for a while, and then just do it out of nowhere, then that might work. Right? Then we might avoid having a terrorist attack to object to it before it happens. It doesn't mean you're going to avoid terrorist attacks after the fact. No, definitely not. Because even after the PA signed the Declaration of Principles of Israel, the PA itself had the PLO launch terrorist attacks, right, against Israel, right, and Hamas did too, right? So, and that was back in 1993. Like literally, as soon before the ink was dry, Arafat was overseeing attacks against Israel, even as he was saying enough of blood and tears, or whatever nonsense he was saying at the White House. But it doesn't mean that Israel should avoid making agreements with countries that, frankly, it really has no beef with. And even Syria, which is crazy to think that it could happen. Yes, we don't want necessarily to have an Islamist Syria, but on the other hand, if they will actually stop attacking the Druze and stop threatening Israel by occasionally launching rockets towards the Golan Heights and stop, their insane Islamist ways, and try to, if the so-called president, even though he's not the president, not even the interim president, he's just the guy who headed the terror organization that took over. Even if we can at least get him to, stop being a complete radical who's attacking his own, the people in Syria that are not from his sect of Islam, right? Like the Christians, the Druze, other Muslims who are in the country who just don't believe in his extremism. If he can tamp down the extremism in himself, as well as the, in the group that he leads, then there might very well be some chance at having some kind of, non-conflictual disengagement of violence, and eventually, probably not at first, but eventually some kind of a peace deal, right? But then again, you still have the Iranians in power, and sure, they're not big fans of HTS. In fact, they're directly opposed to them. So they could very well be funding, and certainly are, going to fund groups in Syria that are going to try to fight against HTS at some point, as long as the Iranian dictatorship remains in place, just like they continue to fund Hamas. And sure, how they do it and how they coordinate it has become more complicated because of the recent Israeli strikes on various targets in Iran. But that doesn't mean Iran, a country of 90 million people with many millions that do support the IRGC and the Iranian dictatorship, like 10 or 20% of the country is supportive of that insanity. So we're talking anywhere from 9 to 18 million people are supportive of that. That's a lot of people. They're going to continue funding even the Hezbollah in some way that they can. They're going to continue funding the Hamas as they do. They're going to continue funding the Houthis as they do. And the Houthis are going to keep throwing rockets at Israel as they are continuing to do even now, right? They're going to continue shooting rockets and drones. And Hezbollah is occasionally going to be doing nonsense, even though most Lebanese people are sick and tired of Hezbollah and want to see them gone from Lebanon. But the fact is they're still there. And yes, they may be mostly relegated to being a political party at this point, but they're still there. They're still active. They're still present. They have not yet been fully disestablished and disassembled, right? Once that happens, then yes, we might see, once that happens, I mean, once the Iranian dictatorship is overthrown, which would have to happen. Glory to Jesus, blessed man of God. Okay, man. Yes. Okay. Well, peace on earth, bro. Um, you know, hey, man. Praise peace on earth. I praise love and peace and love. Whatever you believe, as long as it's peace and love. Yeah. So that's going to do it for now. And once that happens, once the Iranian dictatorship is overthrown, then there could actually be significant advancement for peace in the Middle East and throughout the region and the world. Until then, looks like we might unfortunately have a very hot summer full of conflict, and I really hope we avoid that. So, peace, everybody. Cheers. And from Israel, Shabbat Shalom. And again, happy July 4th. God bless America.